Did you just two-punch kill this werewolf? With your bare hands?
Yeah,
What the fuck are you?
I'm gonna need some explanations here. I mean, he destroyed one of his arms doing it.
It was over. There was no remorse, no hesitation in that brief act of violence. The perfect, furious golden beast lay still, felled in a mere 3 seconds.
Yeah, that's gonna require some explanation.
No sane person would have bet on this outcome.
Wow.
His breathing calm, the victor stood over the fallen behemoth's body.
Yeah, that is the question of the day.
I punched you really hard.
Yeah.
Even as the beast lay crumpled in the snow, he couldn't grasp what had happened. His heart had ruptured, cutting the blood flow to his body and brain, leaving him helpless. That much he knew. If he were a normal creature, he'd be dead.
But he's a phantasmal, so...
As it was, this was a trifling inconvenience.
Okay, yeah, he's just temporarily down.
Once his heart was repaired, his body would heal as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't as if he'd been struck by magecraft exceeding his own mystical nature.
Right.
This was a little different than a grazed knee.
I mean, it's a heart, but yeah.
Which is what was so strange. Your heart doesn't stop from a grazed knee.
Yeah, that's a good question.
The werewolf frantically searched his memory. He managed to remember right up until the moment he raised his claws. But what had come after that? Given the right transformation, he knew he could withstand even a cannon blast. How had a puny human dropped him? Wait. Before that, he had to figure out what exactly his opponent did to him.
Yeah.
The moment he got in close, yes, he'd felt a small impact. The attack was so accurate that it probably only affected his heart. Ridiculous. Even if that was possible, there was no way that alone could stop a werewolf's heart. In the end, no matter how much he thought about it, nothing added up. The answer was out of reach for a werewolf with no knowledge of being backed into a corner, let alone the limits of human skill. Only one thing was certain. He had lost. He tried to piece together the sequence of events. The explosion in his chest, the flash of white. After that, as he was falling over, he took another blow to his back. That was the one that disrupted his heart.
I guess you've never had to rely on skill in your life?
Could lose. Indeed. It was physically impossible.
Yeah, normally.
The boy gnashed his teeth and tensed his body in indignation at this unfair conclusion.
Apparently a very well-trained human.
Soujuuro Shizuki appears to be the answer to that.
Man who fights bears.
Enough thinking. He was ready. From the ground, he glared at his enemy to his side.
Is his heart healing already?
The very next moment, an unknown type of pain coursed down his spine. It had eyes. Cold eyes. Staring. Piercing. Colorless. The moon looked more alive. Its arms were broken. Its inhumanly powerful attack had mangled them beyond recognition. If it was in pain, it would have cried out. But it was silent. Was it ever alive? Those dead eyes. He'd seen eyes like those before.
Oh, had he?
Those eyes without hatred, without joy, without any feeling behind them at all. It's a mindless insect. The werewolf's hair stood on end. What was this creeping chill crawling up his spine? Having never experienced fear, the werewolf didn't know what had become of him. Despite countless clashes against other mystics, it had been a human that broke him. He knew beasts even larger than himself. He knew legendary creatures like himself. He didn't know this. He'd never met, much less imagined, a human-sized bug. The chill down the werewolf's spine was so vicious it threatened to split him in two. If he moved even an inch, it would crush his skull underfoot.
Wow, really?
In spite of the despair gripping him, the boy paradoxically sensed that his opponent would not move at all. This human would exhibit no further violence. It was a creature. No, a stone that held no animal instincts. It masqueraded as a human. The contradiction grated against his heart, his values. A phantom pain born of an unknown emotion. Fear. It wasn't just grating, it was like many needles slowly digging into his heart. This had been his first taste of doubt of reality.
First taste of doubt of reality, I guess. Like they're gonna put some spaces in there.
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Such contradictions existed in the world, after all.
Yes.
They were irrationalities and questions you didn't want to hear the answers to. The suppressed pain suddenly flowed through his body like a raging river. This was also a first. Until now, he'd always been able to control pain. He'd never known what it was like to tremble. An elemental might have even felt sorry for him if it were here to watch.
Maybe.
How sad. Born complete, yet lost in the lunacy of the human world. His heart had fully regenerated.
Well, that was fast.
Howling in mental agony, the beast clutched his own trembling body. Those eyes. Those human eyes looking straight through him. And then, the boy realized the only reason he was still alive. Even with both arms broken, the human could have finished him off with his legs. But it mattered not, because his opponent was giving him a taste of his own medicine. This wasn't revenge for trying to kill him. It was revenge for the wounds he inflicted on the girls. The absurdity of it all made his throat tighten. His breathing was frantic. This human had no sense of self. It had no concern for its own safety when it stood between him and the girls. That must be why it had no more hate or fear, or perhaps even intent to kill him. Indeed, the fact that he was alive had nothing to do with the human's will. The fight was machine-like. So was its judgment. An eye for an eye and nothing more. If the werewolf had killed one of the girls, this exchange would have ended differently.
Possibly, if he could crush her head with his foot.
He shuddered at the thought. He'd never entertained such a possibility. He'd never had to, because he was supposed to be the one exception to that rule. Agony kicked him hard in the gut. No matter the mystic, nothing was immune from injury, from decay.
Oh, yeah.
The boy finally understood an obvious law of the world. Or rather, he'd been taught. Those eyes, they wouldn't stop staring down at him. Retribution was a universal law. He was now painfully aware of that fact. And yet, the one who brought form to this idea was this human. The pain of defeat, the pain in his heart, the pain of comprehending the incomprehensible. Doing the impossible and seeing the invisible.
Yeah. Pain, pain, pain.
The impossibility of it all had shattered his perfect world. It ate at him, consumed every fiber of his being. The doubt made his head spin. It was too much. Humans were impossible to understand. He'd not been made to face the death of another, but his own.
Oh.
Unable to cope, he reverted to his human form. Quietly, he shivered like a frightened child in a mother's lap.
Guess he was just overcome by the fear then.
No, all the blood on your clothes seems to have fixed itself.
Possibly.
As did much of the blood in the snow underneath you.
There's still some there.
Yes, but much of it is gone. That's very impressive. Still lying in the snow, Aoko choked on her words, unable to entirely comprehend what had unfolded.
Yeah, that was pretty weird.
Soujuuro, anta.
She couldn't hide the trembling in her voice.
Nani?
Speaking in his usual way, Soujuuro nonchalantly turned toward her.
Your arms are shattered, man.
今自分が何をしたか分かってんの?
No, he doesn't even know what this kid is.
I killed a dog.
Yeah, he has no clue what just happened. Whoa.
And she's upright, apparently.
Wow.
She
What?
shouted angrily as though he'd done something wrong.
She actually sit up?
Soujuuro looked surprised, wondering what on earth he'd done to upset her. He lowered his gaze back to the wolf boy. Knitting his brow in dismay, Soujuuro finally realized what Aoko was referring to.
心外だな。青崎は分かってると思ってた。
I thought you knew what?
He looked at her in disappointment.
分かってるって何をよ?
Feeling slightly affronted, Aoko responded curtly. Soujuuro sighed.
山じゃ、熊はそう珍しいもの
Oh
じゃない
my god, he actually thought he was fighting a bear. Oh my god. He wasn't even thinking.
以前確かに言ったじゃないか。
That literally was just his bear fighting technique after all. This is like the most head-empty protagonist I've ever seen.
Oh my god, this is amazing! Aoko's jaw hit the floor. It took her a moment to process what he just said. She recalled some meaningless conversation or other from who knows when.
君、もしかして俺をバカにしているのか？まったく。なんで熊を倒すためなんかに修行しなくちゃいけないんだ。
Yeah, there was something about fighting bears. I remember that.
Why would anyone train to fight bears?
Right, that's just what he does.
Yeah.
Is that what he meant?
It seems so innocuous at the time.
Yeah,
but
like, yeah, you're right. Training to fight a bear is a dumb thing
training
to
to fight
do.
a bear is stupid. Why would you have to do that?
Oh.
Wow.
God damn. Okay.
Yeah, now she thought about it. They had spoken about that. He'd mentioned being familiar with large beasts, and she couldn't deny that she'd heard him utter some anachronistic nonsense about training to deal with them.
Yeah.
Which meant he was used to dealing with animals larger than himself. If he'd lived the sort of life that involved run-ins with wild bears, then a man-wolf might only have been surprising, but not particularly frightening.
Huh.
Aoko hung her head. She definitely does not appear to be lying down on the snow anymore.
Yeah, wow, she must have healed fast from that one.
After all this time, who was it that really made no sense?
あなたの勝ちよ、Soujuuro.
Okay, fine. You were right to be worried about bears on the mountain, Soujuuro.
It was hard to tell whether she spoke in admiration or exasperation. Oh, don't think it can't be both. She's very multi-talented. Either way, as she slouched in the snow, Aoko spoke quietly enough so only she could hear her words. So, Toko, what are you gonna do about the fact that your trump card just got beat?
I mean, Aoko and Alice are down. Soujuuro's arms are broken.
He's still got legs.
I mean, yeah, but I don't know if he can fight Toko.
Toko, on the other hand, understood exactly what had transpired.
Yeah, your werewolf got the first taste of fear and didn't know how to handle it.
Bayo lay fallen, now just a sobbing boy.
Even though he is strong enough to go for round 2, he doesn't have the mentality.
And another boy stood over him with 2 shattered arms.
Right.
Near fatally wounded, Aoko and Alice still couldn't stand, but had recovered enough to breathe.
I guess Aoko sat up a little bit.
As for Toko, she only had a few tricks up her sleeve.
Maybe
3 or 4 more runes at best. The magic crests on her back were unusable. She could use the remaining magical energy from the field imprisoning her grandfather, but that would be stupid.
Yeah, letting him go may not be the best idea.
If she released her grandfather, she'd lose ownership of the sacred ground.
Oh, yeah.
Failing to defeat Aoko and Alice now would mean starting over from square one, and she couldn't afford that. The sibling rivalry had to end. Toko had gambled everything on her surprise attack.
Oh. Huh.
Using the fact she was still in Aozaki to infiltrate Misaki's defenses. For 3 years, she'd labored, selling her work to the association.
Working as a mercenary, I guess.
And she'd used 20 years' worth of hair to mobilize an army of familiars. It was now or never.
Yeah, you gave up a lot already.
私は失敗した。
She'd overestimated the werewolf's power. It should have been enough.
Well, I mean...
Against mages alone, Beowulf by himself would have been enough to ensure complete victory.
I mean, yeah, just existing is enough to beat a mage at his level.
But things didn't always go according to plan. Beo's incredible strength was conditional. She knew he wasn't infallible, so why hadn't she prepared a contingency plan?
Because she never thought she'd have to deal with a physical threat.
Her heart as cold as ice, Toko stared at Soujuuro, who stood tall. Well, Beo did what you asked him to and didn't kill the boy, so...
Yeah.
Congratulations! Request granted!
Yeah.
His arms were a hideous mess. The arm he used to strike Beo head-on barely even resembled an arm. His bones were bent out of shape, his muscles were torn to shreds. To say his arm was simply broken would be a gross understatement. Streams of crimson ran down his other arm onto the white snow. The elbow he drove into Beo's back was likely shattered, and his muscle and tendons torn up to his shoulder. Judging from the state of his arms, it was doubtful he would be able to use them again. Worse than his arms were his left leg, and no doubt his internal organs, too.
Yeah, he's gonna need extensive treatment to not be, like, paralyzed.
He'd used the leg to take the full brunt of Beo's charge. At a glance, it looked fine, but it was now just a useless hunk of meat attached to his torso. His insides were worse. Supporting the weight of Beo had ruptured his spine, causing widespread internal bleeding.
So he's dying. Whoop.
Basically, he was a dead man standing. A bird with clipped wings. Living like that wouldn't be living at all. He could barely stand, let alone fight again. In contrast, the collapsed werewolf was unscathed.
Yeah.
Only once had he coughed up blood.
And then he healed up in seconds.
The majority of the pool of red on the snow was Soujuuro's. A crimson tapestry telling the story of the boy who stood strong and defeated a werewolf.
For all of 5 seconds, but yes.
衝撃には反動が伴う。
Yeah.
拳を振るうのなら相応の負担がある。まして相手は人狼。
Turns out the werewolf also has Shadow Gaius powers.
Oh, yeah.
走ってくる鉄の壁を真っ向から殴るようなものだ。
Also, yeah, trying to punch a freight train would probably destroy you.
それを
Perhaps he'd known what would happen. Animals' instincts limit their strength in order to protect their body.
Right, like what Aoko just did.
Compensating for physical weakness with intellect and technique was humanity's forte, and that clash had shown humans at their very best. And yet it had also been beyond human. He'd attacked without concern for his own safety. Without self-preservation in mind, he could go beyond human capability. Enough to strike through the steel-like fur of a legendary werewolf.
Like that strength that lets people pick up cars to save their kids.
But who would have thought that a beast able to withstand a shot from a tank would be felled by a mere human?
Well, there was some skill in targeting the
違う
heart.
ためらうことなく殴りつけたから壊れたのではない。初めからあれは壊すことを前提にしていたな。
He sacrificed his entire body to destroy Bao's heart. Toko felt a chill come over her as she went over in her head what had transpired. It should have been a nightmarish scene, but she was captivated by that supreme display of physical rationality. From the outside looking in, she had witnessed not an accident, but a rational consequence. In that instant, the boy had put his entire being into piercing Bao's chest. As soon as he laid eyes on Aoko and Alice, he had committed himself fully to the task. He sized Bao up, synchronized his breathing, found his weak point, and calculated the exact position, timing, and distance he would need to hold his ground. He knew what to do. He knew what he had to do to win, and did it with everything he had. It had nothing to do with instinct. A wild creature would not have tried to beat something it couldn't.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. An animal would have just run.
Only a human would risk his life when faced with the impossible. That contradiction fed his attack. This man was living on pure Kamina energy.
Yeah.
Do the impossible, see the invisible. He twisted his body from heel to his neck to focus his energy. If Bao had simply tried to run Soujuuro down, the werewolf would probably have won. But that beast wanted to rip him to shreds. Or rather, he was baited into doing so.
Possibly.
After Bao charged, when he planted his feet, he raised his claw, then swung it downward, putting himself off balance.
Because he wasn't thinking about any kind of technique.
His pulse was erratic, his movement wild. In that moment, he was vulnerable. That was when Soujuuro made his move. The beast had overwhelming power, but it was sloppy. Whereas the human concentrated all of his meager power into a single point. That was how the human shifted the balance in his favor. The follow-up elbow attack would rupture Bao's heart. It was a graceless second strike. A sloppy blow no different from Bao's. The elbow was only able to penetrate the beast's golden fur because of the first attack to the chest.
あの時点でベオは丸裸にされていた。無敵の人狼がその機能の一切を休止させ
Well,
られた。
sorta. I guess it made his heart palpitate or something.
つまり
The strike wasn't meant to break, but to disable. All living creatures had weaknesses. No matter how strong the creature, it had weak points and weak moments. Not just physically, but mentally too. A time when they aren't in their best shape. Unable to focus or find motivation. Sickness or a lack of sleep or food, for example, can cause the body's rhythm to go out of sync. For a variety of reasons, intelligent beings risk losing their ability to function properly. Legendary beasts were no exception.
弱点、欠点をつく魔術なら知っているが、全てを投げ打って弱点を生むとはな。
I mean, that kind of sounds like martial arts, but, you know.
The boy's strike to the heart was not an attempt to kill Bao. It was designed to create a weakness in something that had none. The elbow attack took advantage of that break in Bao's invulnerability.
加えて、笑えることに不意打ちですらない。ベオの神経の伝達速度なら、 毒が当たった瞬間に感知し対応で
He
き
was
る
just confused, I guess.
だがそもそもそれを毒と認
Oh,
識でき
yeah,
な
he
けれ
didn't
ば
feel that attack to his
兵
chest
器
at
のしよ
first.
うもない毒ではないものが毒になるなんて落とし穴を誰が教えてやれるものか
She was frustrated, to say the least. The boy was totally committed, utterly selfless. He bet his life on that single moment without expecting a single thing in return. That boy had acquired the experience and skill to do such a thing. It wasn't a miracle of luck, nor a miracle of passion. It wasn't talent, tenacity, or hatred. Without constant, intense training, no one could destroy their own body on a whim like that.
子供には相手が悪かったようね
So he's been under intense training for a long time, I guess.
Are we sure this guy isn't from like the same fucked up village as fucking Soujuuro?
Yeah. Trained to be an assassin somewhere in a remote temple.
Seeing Bayo cowering in the snow, Toko was disappointed in her own lack of foresight. She'd used him for his talent alone, ignoring his inexperience. If Bayo wasn't a child, his life experience might have given him the strength to bounce back and devour Soujuuro after regenerating.
ベオを
Right.
責めるべきかそれとも君
Probably
を評価
scold
すべ
him
きなのか
because it would have helped you immensely if he had the mental fortitude to just stand up and win.
Toko quietly lifted her left hand. Nobody noticed. Standing far away, the boy standing there looked like a hunter from a picture book.
I guess.
He had a slender build, but that was likely because he intentionally shed any excess. Given what she just witnessed, his cluelessness had to be part of an act the
Art of an act. The act of a hunter, yeah.
It
I know.
really does genuinely throw me off sometimes.
Yeah, when you're just reading.
Sometimes I am making a joke of it, but other times it really genuinely throws me off.
Yeah.
She thought to herself, or as she thought to herself, she suddenly remembered. The first thing that had crossed her mind the first time they spoke.
そうだったなだがそれは忘れていたかったよ宗十郎君
Wanted to forget how he ran away the first time he saw you.
No sooner had she felt a slither of sentiment, she returned to her unshakable resolve. She was raised as the heir to the Aozaki household, taught never to question the morality of her actions. That was why, even now, she knew exactly what she had to do.
Kill Soujuuro?
でもよかった
Yeah, more or less.
Soujuuro muttered, unmoving, perhaps because of the pain in his broken arms.
Or his shattered spine and leg.
He didn't look at Aoko. Instead, his gaze was focused on Alice, who was lying prone some way away.
Oh.
Aoko thought he looked lonely.
よかったって何がよ
Beat up a wolf,
Yeah.
she asked, spurring him on. They were mere steps from each other, close enough to touch hands. Their quiet voices carried in the stillness.
私たちが無事だったからなんて言ったら怒るわよ
Okay, in that case, I'm glad you're not dead. She wasn't joking. Soujuuro turned away from her slightly, shaking his head, somehow able to move his
neck.
lower body despite his shattered spine.
Well, or maybe some discs got ruptured. Don't know.
口にするのは3度目だけど青崎の心配はしていないんだいやさっきはちょっと意識が飛んだようなんだけど
Yeah. Yes.
He said as an embarrassed smile crossed his face. The first time, he outright fainted, but the second time, his passion pushed the dizziness and nausea aside. He just calmly did what he could, as best he could. Nevertheless, no matter how calm he tried to be, deep within festered a very real rage.
ふんじゃあ何が良かったのよ宗十郎
Aoko's voice had a slight tinge of annoyance. Soujuuro
だ
responded.
ってようやく約束が守れた そっちだけが約束を守ってるのにこっちは果たせなかっただろう。それがずっと気になっていたんだ。その機会があって本当に良かった。
His relief expressed itself as a small but heartfelt smile. Aoko listened, astonished. For a moment, she couldn't recall what promise he was talking about. When she remembered what he was talking about, what she'd told him all that time ago in the amusement park, her mind went blank.
あいつをやっつけるのに協力したら俺のことは見逃してくれ。
Yeah.
He proposed the deal, but in the end, he hadn't been of any use.
Right.
It must have been eating away at him this entire time. Aoko had considered the agreement binding, but only for herself.
あんなどうでもいいことを。
She just agreed not to kill him.
She muttered in disbelief. Soujuuro gave a nod and affirmed with a tiny
約
voice.
束は自分のために果たすものだって教えてくれたのは青崎だ。だから君が守っている限り俺も守らないといけない。はあ、ずっと俺はそうしたかったん
Now
だ。
I just have this other pain in my shoulder.
And my other shoulder.
Yeah.
And one of my legs.
Pretty much
and
everything.
my entire back.
Right. Pretty much everything below my shoulders, too.
As if listening to a confessional, Aoko stayed silent. She couldn't find the words to say anyway. Soujuuro proved ever the enigma. Taking such a trivial promise so seriously and speaking so sincerely about something so basic. She couldn't wrap her head around how he'd beaten a werewolf, but his personality, that was the real mystery. There was no use trying to figure that out now. To Aoko Aozaki, he was a riddle wrapped up in an enigma, wrapped up in a conundrum.
それじゃ
Forget where that
あ
came from.
借りは返したから帳尻はゼロだ。これで貸し借りはなしだぞ、青崎。
Yeah, I guess so.
Soujuuro said lightly, perhaps attempting to break the silence. Normally, this would have passed her by, but she saw his kindness for what it was.
貸しがついたのはこっちの方よ。
Well, you saved his life a bit.
どうやって返していいかわからないじゃない。
Well, you could deal with your sister.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Soujuuro nodded in happy agreement.
それより青崎の足なんか塞がってるな。
Yeah, magic crests, man.
Yeah, how fast did that thing heal you?
Very apparently.
もしかしてもう立てるのか？
She shot him a stubborn look as if to say, well, duh, obviously. Ever amazed by her grit, he somehow extended his hand, despite the
That's
shattered arm.
That's
No,
the one with the shattered elbow.
Yeah.
The left hand is still hanging limply and bleeding.
Despite being broken at the elbow, to Aoko it looked as sturdy as ever. By all appearances, it was beyond recovery and would be for the rest of his life. Even so,
Well-
he seemed able to ignore the pain for Aoko's sake.
ほんと、
Uh,
あんたってバカ。
he's really just not feeling the pain, I guess.
She uttered under her breath, looking up at him. As much as she hated to admit it, she couldn't refuse his hand. Resigning herself, she reached out to him,
Is that when Toko did her thing?
but her hand never reached his.
Yeah.
A small bell chimed. A line of wind
Oh.
whipped through the air. It cut through his waist like a guillotine.
Ah, yep. Yeah.
Oh dear!
Yeah, you knew Toko was readying something.
Oh, that's fatal.
Yeah.
The pieces began to fall. You can still grab his hand. It's within reach.
Well.
You can give him that as he's dying.
Huh.
What were those things dropping before her eyes? Aoko couldn't remember who they belonged to.
そ、中路
Yeah, her mind's going a little blank there.
That used to be his name, right? The name of whoever lay in the red snow in front of her? His face now rested on the ground beneath her chin. The smell of viscera assaulted her nostrils. A river of blood flowed from what used to be a stomach. It happened so fast. Too fast for her mind to process, in fact. Her only solace was he probably didn't suffer.
Maybe.
From that blow, anyways.
Yeah, you know.
How could she think that so calmly after what she'd witnessed? Her blood boiled at her own stupidity. Which begged the question, how should she treat the one who did this?
Yeah.
She'd used all her anger on herself. She had none left to give anyone else. But this hatred was hers and hers alone. Her problem was this. Could she muster the emotions from this drought of anger? She wasn't sure, but the thought of hunting them down made her smile unconsciously in anticipation. Aoko turned to the old school building, to where Toko was standing with her arm out in front of her. She'd used the same rune magecraft she used against Aoko and Alice, except Soujuuro had no magic crests.
Right, no resistance at all.
Toko's amber eyes were narrowed, staring intensely at the fallen corpse. As to what she might have been feeling, Aoko could not care less. Even if Toko felt regret, Aoko would never forgive her for as long as she drew breath. When she was dead, that was a different story, but...
Maybe.
やはり君からこうしておくべきだったな。
Yeah? Would have saved you the trouble.
Toko wasn't speaking to Aoko, but to the dead body. There was no response. No clouds of breath. Coming to terms that he was truly dead, Aoko pushed herself up to her feet.
案外無様ね。
Facing her sister in the distance, Aoko spoke hoarsely.
でも正しい選択だわ。これで勝負はやり直しだもの。
She turned away from Soujuuro and stared at Aoko. They stood far apart, farther apart than their positions made them seem. Though there was nothing left to say, the two of them exchanged words in respect of the fact that they were once sisters.
ああ、魔術刻印という私の切り札はこの通りで、人狼というカードもお前の切り札の前に敗れ去った。
Okay.
そちらも刻印を使い切り、彼も今息絶えた。互いに決定打はなくなったわけだ。
そうね。
I mean,
私も甘かっ
I
た。
guess.
人狼が再起不能になった時点で、あなたが敗北を認めたなんて勝手に思い上がるんだから。本来ならそうなるんだけど、あなたがそんなに諦めがいいのなら、この町に戻ってきはしないものね。本当に甘かった。
It was clear to Toko that Aoko was trying to suppress her emotions. Aoko was right, though. Her sister had counted on Beowulf to succeed. As mages, no matter what cards Aoko or Alice had in their hands, they were helpless against the werewolf. But then Soujuuro had shown up, and Toko couldn't win as long as he was around. Unfortunately, though he'd stopped the werewolf, he'd been defenseless against a mage.
Yeah, kind of like a triangle there.
So she had to kill him. With Soujuuro out of the way, no one could hold Beo back. It would take time for him to recover, but as long as his wounds were only mental, that could be overcome.
Right.
Alice and Aoko could try to attack again before he recovered, but Alice was being kept in check by the poison, so Toko still had the advantage.
Right.
Stalemate still. The battle would drag on. Unless Aoko were to use it.
Yeah, if maybe you discovered something just now, that'd be great.
Powdery snow began to whirl around. The air around her wailed. It was magecraft that transcended all that was mystical. The gate to miracles beyond human comprehension, ready to show itself.
やる気のようね、青子。
Toko released the crests, maintaining the fields. With that, her grandfather would be freed, and the barriers around Misaki would be restored. Which was not what Toko wanted, but it was that or forfeit her life.
Well, alright.
The crests at her disposal were now twice as powerful as her sister's. Aoko gazed at this new threat with her eyes half closed. None of this was her concern. Far removed from the situation, she was searching for something hidden deeper inside herself, desperate to reach it. There it was. An odd feeling, like picking up algae.
That is a weird analogy.
You ever tried to pick up algae?
No?
Feels weird.
Hmm.
It was not the fire of emotion. It was not solid or great. It must have been people. We must have.
People meant.
It must have been people meant by rising to the occasion.
Yeah.
I was so convinced I was missing a word.
Yeah.
I was just desperately trying to reread it, wanting it to be right.
It must have been what people meant by rising to the occasion.
Abandoning thought itself, Aoko held on to that feeling as she stared at her enemy.
いいわよ、トウコ。
She spoke softly, yet more loudly than a scream.
お望み通り、本当の魔法を見せてあ
I mean, if you've got it, you didn't seem to know how it worked before.
Focusing her power into the dim crest on her right arm, she weaved the words together. A single incantation. Oh god, she's getting light from heaven.
Oh boy.
A final, heartfelt farewell. A brilliant, blue-colored magic taking time back to when a certain someone had been blessed.
Huh.
To put it simply, magecraft is human wisdom. It is the world as we know it. Magic is the singularity that exists between either of those, beyond either of those.
Oh, yes.
At the beginning, the first changed all. Next, the second recognized many. In answer, the third showed the future. Tethered, the fourth concealed itself. And the final fifth had long since lost its significance. Someone once said, had it only ended at the third. Magecraft is the study of history. Feats of our making and life orbiting the planet. My god. But true magic is the providence of a god beyond the heavens. Why do those who stand on the earth extol the virtues of miracles beyond humankind and the planet? This was an undeniable sin. Magic was the enemy of humanity. That's why.
Yeah.
Those who obtain a new magic are killed by the Red Shadow.
聞け、万物の霊長。
Aoko's voice resonated through and high above the winter skies. The air began to fracture, turning the scenery to broken glass. Toko wondered whether she should fight or flee. She decided to try and keep her feelings in check and see this through. But the object of her obsession for so many years was right in front of her. Rationality was slipping from her grasp. Both of their fates were now uncertain. Toko had an overwhelming advantage when it came to her crests and the terrain. When it came to true magic, however.
Right.
If the Aozaki magic was anything like Alice Kuonji's fairy tale monsters, then mage strength was not a part of the equation.
Nope.
At this point, it was Toko against magic itself. And there was no winning against truth. The transcendence and idiosyncrasy of true magic rendered things like magecraft irrelevant.
だが
Toko stared at her sister, wondering if she could actually use it. Her proclamation lacked conviction. She'd raised her voice, but that was out of discipline. It hadn't been the arrogant conviction to sacrifice someone else for her own gain. Having not been chosen to inherit it, Toko couldn't imagine what the magic in her sister was. Only that it was a force violent enough to change the world. No human mind could withstand the audacity required to make an enemy of the world itself. Especially not someone as indecisive as her sister. The power of magic would surely cripple her. Feeling Toko's eyes on her, Aoko doubted herself. She couldn't help but hesitate. Terror gripped her heart tighter.
でもだからって
She couldn't run away forever. Her hesitation and terror meant she would never forgive herself for stopping now. Closing her eyes, she pushed herself into the final stage. Time stopped, like a light being switched off. She submerged herself in her own darkness. Everything froze. Only she moved. Everything around her disappeared as she passed a limitless stream of stars.
Desert?
And as soon as she did, she wanted to disappear into the empty, thoughtless place. Thoughtlessness.
Thoughtlessness place. Oh.
The empty, thoughtlessness place she arrived in without any answers. Not again. The red shadow will surely come this time. Suddenly, I saw a new memory. Possibly because I used another to make the trade for
Blank.
blank.
Could be magic if it's 5 letters.
I
Kinda
heard
giving
a
us that.
familiar yet new sound.
I wish for nothing. I seek nothing.
Only to fuse with the consciousness that hurtles backward in time to zero. The sound, the bitter, sad meaninglessness pulls me by my hair. But I have to resist. The red ghost was always going to be my biggest hurdle.
I must forget the value of life. I must forget the dignity of death.
I am astounded you can read that.
Ah.
The sound persists. It's got nothing to do with this journey. It's just an external distraction. And yet, I think I finally understand. I know what noise has been making me so uneasy.
What the?
The unsettling whispers were directed at me. Or perhaps the red shadow was perplexed by the quiet soul listening to it. It glares at me, its eyes full of hatred. How could I be so unprepared? Don't tell me. You can't be serious. You're going to turn me into your prey for that.
That is your everything. You have nothing else.
The effect of rewinding, the decision to never say never, his prime, his meaningless life. She negated it. She used her superior power to negate that sound which was an absolute rule to him. Just brushed it aside like it was a cobweb. The sound disappeared. A new one replaced it.
I wish for nothing. I want nothing.
What's with the backslash?
I don't know.
Or the forward slash, rather.
Yeah, maybe they meant to italicize it.
A pure, obedient heart.
That's why you get nothing.
Oh, they did it again, though.
Hmm.
A life of falsehood led by affirmation.
This is ridiculous.
My legs moved forward. My legs moved toward the future. They stop. Change of plans. Taking a different path. Nothing's changed. Just something has made me real mad. How can I put it? God,
Live is the past, you idiot.
If I don't complain about something to someone, I'll explode. even if it's just to the voice, or to he who hears it, or to the part of me who just stays quiet and watches, or to the one who did that to him. With no answer, I open my eyes. And we're right at time.
Yep.
I fucking hate it. I
But,
fucking hate it.
We also don't know how long the scene will
No,
go on. And,
no, we don't. I don't think we're done yet. I don't think we're anywhere near done yet.
No, we're not even close.
Like, not
There's
even
gotta be-
close.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
yeah, this scene went on a while. Okay, so some kind of true magic is happening.
Yeah, some kind of true magic is happening. Presumably the blue one.
Yeah. We'll find out what
something
happens.
to do with time.
Probably, yes. That seems to be the complaint at the moment. So yeah, we are going to find out what all of this is leading to next time.
Yeah.
Until then, we will catch you in the new year.
Actually, one thing we should probably mention before that.
Yeah.
New series next week as well.
Ah, yes, that.
Yeah.
We're done with the double Mahoutsukai.
Mahoutsuka's going back to just, single sessions. So
Yep.
these extended length episodes are going to stop next week. But, hey, new series coming, so...
Should look out for that.
Yeah, it's Hysteria next week.
Yep.
Assuming that I can make it work.
Yeah, probably. So, it should be fine.
Till
So look forward
then.
to that, and we'll catch you later.